are talking Alucarda. This is a 1977 Mexican occult movie. Now, this seems to be quite the cult favourite. Having never seen this movie before, this was a first-time watch. So let me give you a brief plot synopsis. It primarily focuses on two young girls, one of which is called Justine, who is an orphan that is sent to a convent. And there she meets Alucarda, who seems to be somewhat of a rebellious spirit, and the two of them become friends and decide to push back against the strict rules of the convent and are ultimately punished for it. And then they decide to turn to the dark side. And by the dark side, of course, I mean Satan. And he is quite happy to take these girl souls and imbue them with occult powers, you might say. Along this time, we have this doctor who kind of turns up around halfway through the movie, and he's initially appalled by the kind of barbaric nature of this convent and their kind of medieval style ways that they treat young girls, and him as a man of science can't believe the kind of the barbarity that he's kind of seeing, but obviously he can't believe that there's anything kind of supernatural going on either. But of course there is, because these two girls are now the daughters of Satan. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So, as I've said, this movie seems to be a bit of a cult favourite. I've not watched it before until now, and I kind of watched a few, reviews and read a couple of reviews on IMDb, and a lot of them was masterpiece, 10 out of 10. Let me tell you, I'm not going to be giving this movie a 10 out of 10 because I'm probably going to go against the grain of many people on this one. Let me just tell you. However, there are a few things that I do think were fairly impressive. And this is the kind of first thing I would say is the gothic kind of set design and the kind of location shooting that this movie has. Obviously, it's shot in Mexico, traditionally quite a religious place, shall we say, and there is some fantastically creepy kind of sets and kind of location shooting here that give it this kind of like medieval feel, even though this movie doesn't take place then. But you still feel that this kind of movie is that the people in this movie are kind of somewhat kind of out of time, and this place just kind of oozes kind of this creepiness factor. There are quite a lot of kind of symbolism, quite a lot of imagery here that is obviously to do with kind of satanic kind of worship and things like this. And there are some instances where I do feel it was quite effective. The last kind of sort of 10 minutes or so of the movie, where we have this kind of big finale, fiery finale. There's elements of that I kind of quite liked, and we have Alucarda kind of going full on kind of like Sith Lord, kind of at that point, kind of taking the place apart. And there's elements of that which I thought were quite kind of effective. She seemed legitimately kind of dangerous, kind of at that point. I kind of quite like the way that the movie has its parallels between what is perceived as evil in regards to these girls kind of, being somewhat kind of free spirit, should we say, initially, which seems relatively innocuous, but then obviously it gets kind of worse, but the barbaric way that kind of the church ends up kind of punishing them, and their kind of rules seem to be just as kind of harmful than this kind of their apparent fear of devil worship and things like that. So it's almost like the cure is as bad as the kind of the curse or whatever. So in that respect, I actually quite liked our doctor character here as well. He doesn't really turn up until halfway through, I will say, but I quite like the juxtaposition between kind of a scientific mind and all these kind of like religious kind of fanatics, so to speak, and they're kind of dividing opinions there. And the movie the actors kind of overact, and I'm going to come on to that again in a minute, but in some ways I've got to say it made for quite dynamic watching, especially the kind of like the actress who plays Alucarda, kind of like her overacting. I got to say I kind of enjoyed it in a way. It's kind of funny, and kind of really adds this overly dramatic kind of stance to everything. But I have to be honest, I found this movie a struggle to get through, to be completely honest with you. So, I mean, there was tons of reviews that gave this like full marks, and I'm thinking, there's a lot of nudity in this movie, there's a lot of kind of like lesbian and that kind of stuff. Thinking, Is this why people are giving it such a high mark? Really? Is that all it takes? But to be honest with you, I found this movie a little bit of a struggle to get through. I couldn't even do it in one sitting. I had to stop a couple of times because I just couldn't get through it in one sitting. And there's a number of reasons for that. Now, I'll remind you, this is a 1977 movie, the same year that Star Wars came out. And a couple of years prior to this, Jaws came out. So, you know, I won't listen to the excuse that this is somewhat unsophisticated because of the time it was made. There were examples of movies being far more kind of sophisticated than this at the time. And I appreciate this is a lower budget film, but it doesn't mean to say you can't have nuance and stuff in there. But let me get maybe somewhat of a superficial criticism out of the way first of all. If you were kind of to edit this movie down, I reckon there's legitimately about 20 minutes of this movie where it is purely women shrieking. It honestly gave me a headache. There's so much women shrieking in this movie, like shrill shrieks, and it was like a right through my head. Maybe that's the occult power coming through, I don't know. But honestly, it was so much. And I get, obviously, there's fearful stuff going on in the story. I understand that. But man, it was like hard to sit through at times. So that's a little bit of maybe a superficial critique, I will say. What else can I say? The overacting is strong with this one. I've mentioned the actress who plays Alucarda is like really kind of hamming it up, and in like I said, in some ways, like kind of it works in a weird way because she's meant to be this kind of, you know, possessed type person. Even though there's some similarities between vampires here, I wasn't quite sure if they're meant to be vampires because we seem they get affected by holy water and things. And anyway, but that kind of works, but it's still massively overacting. But it's not just her; it's practically everyone. Maybe with the exception of the guy who plays the doctor, was a little bit kind of, you know, more subtle, shall we say? But there's a lot of kind of overacting here, and it's somewhat laughable at times. It's so bad at times; it's actually a little bit kind of laughable. The story itself, to me, was poorly paced, because when it's all said and done, there's not a huge amount of plot here, but there's things to me that were just skipped through. So, like the beginning of the movie, we were introduced to Justine, and she comes to this kind of this convent, and she meets Alucarda, and within like seconds, they seem to be best buds, and they're kind of doing blood pacts together, saying how they're going to commit suicide if you know, if one of them dies, the other one's going to commit suicide. I think you've literally just kind of met, and there's no time to kind of build the characters before we kind of get into them kind of like, you know, becoming kind of walking down the kind of like the dark path, so to speak. So I kind of thought, and then we kind of like from there, the movie just seems to kind of like sit on its hands for a while and kind of not really have any type of forward momentum in kind of regards to the kind of the story. So and then we have these other elements that are introduced that are kind of like these satanic kind of like pagan style people that are in the woods for some reason. They're just in the woods, just hanging out in the woods, and they're kind of doing all this like weird stuff. They can. So what you know, where are they? What are they doing in the day? You know, I don't know. It just is like, oh yeah, that'll look cool. That'll look kind of like, you know, spooky on the screen, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I can be a little bit forgiving with things like this, but I don't know. To me, it was just like, oh, let's just have lots of kind of symbolism and kind of like surreal kind of like sequences, but we won't really give it any context, or we won't kind of really give it any kind of realistic narrative thread or anything like that. Again, I appreciate it's a 77 movie, but to me, this story was just weak. I mean, there were some things I liked. I like the way the church was seen to be as barbaric as maybe these kind of like these what you would consider Satanists to be, but the movie that's around it was kind of a narratively a little bit of a weak one. I mean, even our protagonist, who is this doctor, really isn't introduced until halfway through the film. This movie to me seems like it may have been cut down from a longer one. I don't know if it was, but you know, the version that I've got, it seems to be that the running time seems to be consistent with what everyone was watching. So you know, there may be a longer cut somewhere, but this is the cut that is out there. It just seemed to be like chopped together, to be honest. So it's interesting, and I've got to say, and I've mentioned the movie film has these surreal elements, and it has elements of kind of it's not an art house film, but there's surreal and kind of like absurdism elements. And I always think sometimes when I see people like reacting to kind of art house movies, they're like, oh yeah, I loved it. I'm thinking, did you love it, or did you just not understand it but don't want to seem like an idiot, so therefore you could say, yeah, I totally was like in love with it, yeah, great, yeah. That's how I always think. I mean, I'm sure there are people who love certain art films, but to me, I always think people just kind of go, yeah, it was great, because I didn't really understand it, but don't want to seem like they don't understand it. So just, oh yeah, it was great, I totally got it. And to agree, this is maybe this one. Who knows? I can't really understand why people like this movie so much. It wasn't terrible. You know, there was elements here that I thought were interesting, but I didn't think it was a particularly kind of strong movie. As such, it wasn't a particularly interesting narrative or interesting fleshed out characters or good acting. There's none of that. There's some cool imagery here and there, but that's kind of it. I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.